a sealed diplomatic vehicle, a missing royal artifact, and a royal guard who didn't flinch when Donald Trump demanded the gates be opened. When Sergeant William Harrington spotted a crate bearing the Queen's crest being loaded into Trump's convoy outside Lancaster House, he broke 400 years of protocol with a single move to Nice and cracked open a scandal no one was supposed to see. What was inside the trunk? Why did Trump try to leave with it? And why did Buckingham Palace stay completely silent until it was too late? Before we reveal what happened that night and why the world is still talking about it, make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon on and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, because what you're about to see was almost buried in velvet. The rain fell with quiet precision. London rain, not a storm, not a downpour, just enough to soak the old stone and make the courtyard gleam like polished marble. Lancaster House loomed behind the mist, its neoclassical facade cast in amber light from iron lanterns flanking the main colonnade. Beyond the columns, a dinner had just ended, diplomatic, closed door, full of veiled intentions and expensive cutlery. But out here, in the cold, everything felt older than politics. Sergeant William Harrington stood at his post, utterly still. His tall frame was wrapped in crimson wool, gold buttons gleaming like medals against the drizzle. His tall ceremonial bearskin hat, solid black, soaked now and dripping, hadn't shifted an inch in 2 hours. But under it, his eyes moved, always scanning, always calculating. He wasn't a statue, and tonight he wasn't just ceremonial. Harrington had seen war before he saw Windsor, Afghanistan twice. One shoulder still popped in the cold, a reminder of the last time a decision had to be made before orders came down. He didn't speak of it, not to the younger guards who admired the press of his uniform, nor to the palace liaisons who thought they knew the meaning of composure. He watched everything now, especially the line of black vehicles idling across the courtyard. 3 Range Rovers, 1 Rolls-Royce, and a low, long, heavily armoured Lincoln Navigator with American diplomatic plates and run-flat tyres. That one hadn't been on the schedule. But it arrived just as the guests were rising from dessert, engines purring, Secret Service stepping out into the wet. The routine was supposed to be flawless. Dignitaries in, dignitaries out. No questions asked. Just eyes forward, ceremonial smiles, and a posture that said everything was under control. But something about tonight whispered otherwise. Raindrops tapped on Harrington's rifle barrel. He shifted slightly, not enough for anyone to notice, just enough to reset his weight, recalibrate the angle of his vision. A trick of the shoulder so his eyes could better follow the movement across the courtyard. 2 men in black coats had just exited the service wing, wheeling a short cart between them. On it, sealed crates, grey, padded. One of them bore a faint gold emblem, hard to see under the tarp and droplets, but Harrington caught it as the cart passed under a lantern. A crown, a lion, a thistle, not just any insignia. The Queen's personal crest. He blinked once, very slowly, not to delay thought, but to buy time. Had he seen what he thought he saw? The crate was already vanishing into the back of the Lincoln. One aide grunted as he lifted it. The driver reached forward, slammed the trunk with more force than necessary, metal on metal, sealed shut like a coffin. Harrington's posture didn't change, but his breath did. The cold night air pulled deeper into his lungs. Somewhere in the house behind him, glasses were being cleared, coats retrieved, small talk exchanged. But out here, something was wrong, and William Harrington had never been the kind of guard to ignore what rain tried to wash away. The trunk had shut, but the feeling hadn't. Harrington's fingers hovered just above the grip of his rifle, not tense, not twitching, just aware. He didn't move, but internally the checklist had begun. First the crate, now the vehicle. Every piece of this evening was beginning to sit wrong in his bones. He tapped twice against the inside of his coat cuff. A slim device embedded in the lining flickered to life, casting a faint blue light on his wrist. The portable clearance log. His thumb slid across the interface, scanning tonight's registered fleet. 10 vehicles approved for departure from Lancaster House. One of them was an American convoy vehicle, yes, but a Suburban, not a Navigator. and that one was scheduled to carry personnel only. No cargo, no sealed crates, no diplomatic cases. This wasn't a mistake. This was unscheduled. Across the courtyard, a second royal guard rotated positions, marching with deliberate rhythm. Harrington didn't signal. Not yet. There was still a chance this was some last-minute deviation cleared through internal diplomatic channels. But even as he told himself that, he watched the navigator more closely. The back windows were tinted deeper than regulation, an imported model, likely reinforced. As rain dripped from the chrome trim, Harrington noticed a pattern on the tyres, small ridges just above the treadline. Run flats, yes, but also custom-stamped, military-grade. The kind of thing used in armoured state vehicles across NATO, but not usually under foreign command without prior authorization. A crate, a modified vehicle, no log entry. He checked again, still nothing. Not denied, not pending, just blank. And in this world, blank didn't mean forgotten. Blank meant erased. Behind him, movement. The double doors of Lancaster House eased open. Staff emerged in quiet ways, white gloves, pressed jackets, murmuring farewells in diplomatic tones. A laugh here from a handshake there. A British official gestured toward the Rolls-Royce, ushering a delegate toward it under an umbrella. But the navigator idled, still closed, still sealed. Harrington watched a second aide jog out from the side corridor. He approached the American vehicle quickly, glanced once over his shoulder, then climbed into the passenger side without a word. The interior light flickered on for a second, and Harrington caught the silhouette of another crate wedged behind the seats. He blinked again, once, slow. Then he tapped the edge of his cuff device and pulled up the Royal Collection watch list. Not many guards even knew that list existed, let alone how to access it in the field. But Harrington wasn't most guards. He'd trained beyond ceremony, knew the sign, knew the stakes. Within seconds, the crest he'd seen on the crate confirmed what he already feared. Item classification: heirloom, Class A. Last logged location: Windsor, Secure Vault 3B. Movement, authorization pending, flagged. And yet, here it was, loaded into a foreign vehicle on Crown property with no clearance, no escort, no log trail. The air shifted. Harrington didn't move his body, but inside, something locked into place. Not panic, not even alarm, just clarity. Whatever tonight had been meant to be, it had just changed, and the man who stood unmoving in the rain would now become the immovable thing the night hadn't planned for. The wind shifted just slightly, pushing the rain sideways now, thin slants across the marble facade, spattering softly against Harrington's cheek. Still he didn't move. Only his eyes tracked the scene, methodical, exact. He tapped into the second tier of his log interface. Event flagging protocols. Every line of procedure drilled into him since Sandhurst was cascading through his mind, not for drama, not for show, for precision. The convoy was foreign. That alone granted it a layer of diplomatic insulation. But even insulation had limits. And tonight, the load was heavy. Too heavy. He zoomed in on the trunk's thermographic profile. The sensor embedded in his cuff interface, standard issue but rarely used, pinged once before displaying the image on his retinal overlay. A faint heat signature hovered behind the rear seat wall, warmer than ambient, regulated, box-shaped. Archival temperature range, that sealed it. This wasn't standard transport. This was preservation-grade carriage, the kind used for climate-sensitive artifact. He took in a slow breath. A quiet inhale, deep into the lungs, like someone lowering themselves into cold water. He needed the clarity now, the pause before action. He keyed into his encrypted earpiece, low frequency, direct line to the post commander inside the estate. Harrington, requesting confirmation on late-stage crate transfer via U.S. diplomatic vehicle. Item may be Class A. There was silence for a beat too long, then a clipped voice responded. No documentation for cargo, stand by. Observe only, do not engage unless instructed. Harrington tapped once to acknowledge, but his gut had already disengaged from protocol. observe only. That line had always troubled him. He remembered the last time he followed it. Kandahar, civilian boy, improvised cart. Too many brass thought the risk wasn't worth delaying a convoy. They observed. And 12 hours later, 3 good men were names on a wall. Since then, he'd come to understand that observation wasn't the absence of action. It was the build-up to it. His father had once told him, back when he was just a boy polishing his first cadet boots, "When you serve the crown, son, you don't just follow orders, you follow conscience. Because there'll come a day when they don't give you one." Tonight felt like that day. A sharp click jolted him back, the sound of the navigator's lock rearming, remote activated, too fast, too clean, not standard. That wasn't just someone securing a trunk, that was someone trying to keep it closed. Then it came, the thing that tipped him. A hand reached across the interior. White cuff, gold ring, familiar shape. Donald Trump's. The man had just entered the vehicle. He'd reached across the crate, not around it, not by accident, but over it. Brief contact, checking something, reassuring himself. The former President of the United States had just physically confirmed the crate's presence. And that meant everything Harrington feared was true. This wasn't oversight, it was orchestration. Harrington's hand hovered just above the call escalation switch. Not pressed, not yet. Because if he was wrong, if this really was a misunderstanding buried in red tape and diplomatic channels, then he would be disciplined, stripped of duty, demoted at best, maybe even discharged. But if he was right, then the crown was being robbed in the rain, under its own lanterns, by a man who once dined at its table. The rain hit harder now, washing the gold trim of his uniform to darker shade. Still he didn't move, because William Harrington was many things. But above all, he was the line that couldn't be crossed without consequence. And tonight, someone had just stepped over it. The door clicked. It wasn't loud, but somehow, in the mist and the mounting pressure of the courtyard, it sounded like a starting pistol. The rear door of the navigator opened with a hiss of hydraulics. A black umbrella unfurled before the man's foot touched the gravel. And then he appeared. Donald Trump stepped down onto British stone, like he still believed the world revolved around the sound of his shoes. His overcoat was dark wool, draped carefully to hide weight, but not ego. His expression, chiseled somewhere between impatience and expectation, suggested this delay had already offended him. Behind him, 2 aides scrambled to stay dry. One held the umbrella. The other gripped a sealed leather portfolio close to his chest, like it might melt in the rain. Trump didn't notice either of them. His eyes were fixed ahead, toward the gate, the motorcade, the world that was meant to move when he moved. But Harrington didn't move, and neither did the gate. Trump paused for just long enough to register that something wasn't flowing correctly. Then he glanced to the side and saw the uniform. The red wool, the tall black bearskin hat, the stillness, and just beyond the edge of that stillness, a glint of authority that didn't come from noise, but from nerve. "Hey!" Trump barked, motioning with one hand. "What's going on? Why aren't we moving?" A Secret Service agent stepped in beside him, whispering quickly into his ear. Another tapped a tablet screen, scanning GPS route, checking on the hold. Then a voice answered, clean, British, precise. "Sir, departure has been paused. We're confirming the clearance of your vehicle's cargo." Trump turned, confused. "Cargo?" Harrington finally stepped forward, one measured pace. Not aggressive, not deferential, just correct. "Sir," he said clearly, "Sergeant William Harrington, Royal Guard assigned to Lancaster House perimeter detail. Your vehicle has been observed loading a sealed crate bearing insignia from the royal collection. That item does not appear on the movement manifest." Trump blinked once, slowly, then looked around as if expecting someone else to correct the situation. He pointed toward the vehicle. "That's a diplomatic gift. Cleared through my team. Should have been filed hours ago. You don't hold up a former president's car over admin errors." Harrington didn't blink. "Respectfully, sir, even ceremonial transfers involving Crown property must be declared, inventoried, and escorted by Royal Collections officers. No such clearance exists." Trump's mouth tensed, but he forced a smile. "Okay, well, you've said your piece. Now stand down and open the gate." He moved to step around him. Harrington didn't move. The wind picked up then, just slightly, pushing rain against their coats, against their faces. Somewhere behind the colonnade, a door creaked open again. More movement, aides shifting under cover, someone watching from the upper windows. Trump's agent stepped closer. "Is this your call, Sergeant? Or is someone higher up confused about who they're talking to?" Harrington's voice didn't change. "This is a procedural hold. I have notified post command. If clarification is needed, your party may present cargo documentation now." Trump laughed, just once, a short bark with no real humour. "Let me get this straight. You're going to delay a diplomatic convoy on British soil because you think you saw a crest." Harrington's jaw remained still. "I verified it." Trump's voice dropped lower. "Son, I've been on more airfields and inside more vaults than you've had hot meal. That crate is a gift, cleared by senior channels. If you don't stand down right now, your queen's going to be apologising to me personally by morning." Harrington didn't flinch. He said one sentence, not loud, but it cut like a wire through fog. "She's not my queen." The air stiffened. Trump narrowed his eyes. "She was." And now, Harrington's voice still calm, still even. "I'm guarding what she left behind." There it was, the shift. Even Trump felt it. The conversation was no longer about paperwork or pride or politics. It was about something older, heavier, something that didn't move when men shouted. He turned to his aide. "Call their liaison. Get me someone with a title." The aide vanished into the mist, and Harrington stood in the rain, immovable, waiting for what would come next. For a long moment, no one spoke. The rain fell harder now, drumming softly on car roofs and pooling along the carved stone seams of the courtyard. The Lincoln Navigator sat like a sealed vault, black and still, while the man who had arrived in it stood steaming in irritation. Trump turned again, slower this time. "You're not serious." Sergeant Harrington's posture didn't waver. He hadn't blinked in nearly 30 seconds. Only his jaw moved, once, barely perceptible, like someone biting down on certainty. Trump spread his arms as if appealing to invisible cameras. "A gift! A commemorative gesture. Your people knew we'd be making a symbolic transfer. These things happen all the time. It's not contraband, it's diplomacy." A ripple passed through the staff, lingering beneath the colonnade. Faces peeked from between curtains. The valet by the Rolls-Royce shifted uneasily. Harrington's voice remained steady. "Sir, I respect your office, but I cannot allow this vehicle to leave the premises without inspection of its cargo. There is no documentation for the item observed. Its markings identify it as Royal Collection property." Trump's security lead stepped closer. American accent clipped. "Sergeant, you're encroaching on diplomatic immunity. Our convoy is protected under US-UK agreement. You are not authorized to detain, open, or obstruct this vehicle." Harrington's reply was immediate. "I am not detaining. I am preventing unauthorized removal of a potentially classified cultural asset pending verification. That right is granted under Crown Preservation Protocol, Section 4. He took one small step forward, not aggressive, not even hostile, just firm. Trump's smirk faded. "You've rehearsed that, haven't you?" "I live it, sir." The moment tensed. Then, motion from the far end of the courtyard. Two figures stepped into the mist, one tall, the other shorter, draped in teal. Gasps murmured under breath. King Charles, Queen Camilla. No ceremony. No escorts, just the two of them, drawn by disruption. Their steps echoed slightly against the wet marble, boots and heels clicking in an accidental rhythm. Trump turned, then smiled, relieved, almost triumphant. He raised a hand in greeting. "Your Majesties, thank you. We seem to have a little overreach happening here. One of your soldiers is confusing loyalty with theatrics." Camilla's expression was unreadable. Charles didn't speak. Not yet. Harrington turned slowly to face them, then bowed his head. Not low, but exact. A bow born not from fear, but fidelity. "Your Majesties," he said with perfect restraint. "I apologize for the disturbance. However," he turned back to Trump. This vehicle contains an item bearing the late Queen's personal crest. I witnessed it myself. It is undocumented, and I believe its removal without oversight constitutes a breach of Royal Asset Protocol." Trump raised both hands now, exasperated. "With respect, you're creating a diplomatic mess. I'll answer to Charles if need be, but this is absurd. It's a decorative crate, a piece of shared history, for display." Charles tilted his head slowly. "What piece?" Trump paused, just for a beat. "A ceremonial necklace, diamonds, replica, commissioned through your office, I was told." Camilla stepped forward now, her lips pressed into a shape that might have once been a smile. "There was no such authorization," she said quietly. Trump blinked. "But your secretary—" "My secretary does not sign over the crown jewels," she snapped. Charles finally stepped closer. "If you are transporting an artifact bearing Elizabeth's crest, then this matter is not decorative, Mr. Trump. It is sacred." Trump's tone hardened. "I didn't steal anything. I accepted a gift, cleared through the proper channels. If there's been an error, it's on your side." Harrington took another step toward the vehicle. His eyes flicked to the trunk, then back to the former president. "With due respect, sir, open it." Trump's aide stepped between them. "That's not happening." Harrington turned to King Charles. "Your Majesty, I request royal confirmation to initiate emergency protocol under Section 4, Subclause B. Forced inspection in presence of sovereign." Charles hesitated, then nodded. "Granted." And just like that, every breath in the courtyard paused. Trump looked stunned. "You're allowing this?" Charles didn't flinch. "You're demanding we don't." Camilla's eyes flicked toward the trunk. Her voice dropped. "We should stop this before it escalates." But the rain had already made everything irreversible, and Sergeant Harrington was already walking toward the car. The gravel shifted under Harrington's boots as he crossed the courtyard. The navigator loomed ahead, sleek and silent, no longer just a car, but a symbol, a vault, a battlefield, and somewhere behind that steel and velvet, a buried truth was humming. He paused beside the trunk, rain sliding down the polished black paint. His gloves, soaked through, curled slightly around his tablet as he keyed in the override protocol. The screen blinked. Still no cargo ID. Still no digital manifest. Still blank. Trump's security detail wasn't moving, but the tension in their shoulders screamed alert. One agent adjusted the angle of his coat, revealing the squared silhouette of a sidearm beneath. Harrington didn't react. He wasn't armed for combat tonight, only for clarity. Behind him, Trump's voice rang. "Sergeant, this is your final warning. You touch that car, and you will answer not just to my country, but to this crown, when cooler heads prevail." Harrington didn't look back. "I'm answering to the crown now." Another few steps brought him to the rear of the vehicle. He placed one gloved hand on the latch. It was locked, but not for long. Rain tapped like a countdown on the roof above. Trump turned to King Charles, voice rising. "You're letting a guard assault diplomatic property on royal grounds. Is this how Britain honours its guests now?" Charles stared at the trunk, silent, then at Harrington. "I'm letting protocol do what politics won't," he said. Trump stepped forward. "This is insanity." Camilla's voice cut through. "Then prove it's just a replica. Open it yourself." Trump froze. That pause, it lasted less than a second, but it told the entire courtyard everything. He wouldn't open it. Couldn't. Instead, he turned back to Harrington. "If you do this, you'll be court-martialed. You'll never wear that uniform again." Harrington lowered his tablet. "I'd rather lose the uniform than watch the legacy it protects vanish into a convoy." Then it happened. The small sound that changed everything. Click, a mechanical chirp. Faint, but unmistakable. The trunk had just locked itself. Again. Remote rearm. Silent security measure. Too fast for a manual system. Harrington's head turned slightly, just enough to catch the angle of Trump's aide, stepping back from the vehicle, one hand still retreating into his overcoat. A remote trigger. Anticipated resistance. Countermeasures. This wasn't improvised. It was planned, and that was the final crack in the dam. Trump opened his mouth to speak again, likely a protest, a bluff, a threat. But Harrington had already moved, one swift step forward, a pivot, his left hand guiding the rifle into position, not raised to fire, but inverted. The butt plate, smooth and steel, lifted like a judge raising a gavel. A sharp intake of breath from the gathered crowd. Then, crack! The impact was clean, direct, final. The butt of the rifle slammed against the lock with a sound like a closing door at the end of an era. Paint chipped, metal caved. The custom latch, reinforced but not indestructible, gave way. The trunk jolted, and then it opened, an inch, then another, then fully. Rain struck the velvet lining inside like applause. The courtyard went still. No one moved. No one spoke. The world hung in that breathless space between silence and revelation. Until, "What the hell have you done?" Trump's voice broke the spell like glass shattering. He charged forward, coat flapping, fury unravelling. "You just destroyed private property. That's diplomatic cargo." But the words barely landed, because all eyes, Charles's, Camilla's, the aides, even the security staff, had shifted downward, to what lay inside the trunk, to the soft, unmistakable gleam of diamonds, dozens of them, resting in custom velvet, secured in a case so pristine it still bore the Windsor seal, the Queen's seal. The case wasn't a replica, and neither were the stones. Trump was still shouting, but the noise was background now, like a car alarm wailing in a cathedral. Nobody looked at him. All eyes were on the case. It sat, centred in the trunk, like it had been laid there by fate. Midnight blue velvet interior, brass corners, military-grade clasps. The seal stitched into the inside lid was unmistakable, E2R, flanked by laurels and the Windsor coat of arms. And inside, diamonds, not loose, not scattered, arranged, oval cuts, cushion cuts, pear-shaped brilliance. 12 stones nestled in padded recesses, shaped to cradle, not protect, royal heritage. At the centre, 2 twins, oval, perfect, burning cold fire under the misted lanterns. Cullinan III and Fifth, the Queen's coronation pairing, gone since rehearsal, assumed temporarily transferred, listed as pending inspection for over a month. Whispers had started among the Royal Collection stewards, but no alarms had been raised, until now. Queen Camilla inhaled sharply. Charles closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them, sharper, older somehow. Trump surged forward. "You violated a diplomatic seal. That case was logged for ceremonial review. It's a misunderstanding." Harrington turned. He didn't yell, he didn't posture, he just said, calmly, this was no misunderstanding. Trump jabbed a finger toward him. "You're a guard, a doorman in boots. You don't get to decide what's royal and what's criminal." Harrington stepped back from the vehicle. "I didn't decide. The seal did." Camilla's voice cut in, colder now, controlled. "What else is in the case?" Harrington didn't answer. He reached in and gently lifted a slim, leather-bound portfolio tucked beneath the diamonds. Flipping it open revealed sketches, professional, annotated, with gold foil stamping, jewellery designs, necklaces, 12 stone configurations, a central pendant flanked by twin oval gems. The notes along the margins were dated. Vienna Gala. Final fitting by Thursday. Handwritten initials in the corner. DJ Camilla's. Trump reached for the folder. Harrington handed it to Charles instead. Charles scanned the page, then looked at Camilla. "You were remounting them?" Her jaw tightened. "They were unused." Charles didn't speak. Camilla turned to Trump. "Say something." Trump shifted. "We weren't stealing. It was temporary. A gesture." Harrington raised the velvet lid on a side compartment. Inside, archival tags. Numbered. From Balmoral's private vault. Queen Mary's lesser-known heirlooms. 5 small stones, each labelled Royal Collection, Restricted Transfer. The silence was no longer shocked. It was reckoning. Trump spoke again, quieter now. You don't understand diplomacy. These things, they're symbolic. Sometimes they have to be moved discreetly to make points, as we were going to return everything. Camilla added, "These stones don't mean anything locked in glass." Harrington replied, "They don't mean anything when they're melted either." From the upper windows, someone lowered a camera. Inside the archway, two aides exchanged nervous glances. Every corner of the courtyard felt like it was watching itself. Then, footsteps, not rushed, not loud, but purposeful. From the north entrance, through the colonnade, entered Princess Anne. No guards, no escort, just a dark olive jacket, damp riding boots, and a face like carved stone. She walked with total authority, not toward Charles, not toward Trump, toward the trunk. Harrington stepped aside instinctively. Anne peered in, lips thinning as she studied the content. She didn't gasp, she didn't blink. She looked up at Trump. "At Balmoral, we inventory every spring. That case was last seen in Vault 3B. It was under direct royal restriction." She glanced to Charles. "Who authorized this transfer?" Charles shook his head. Anne looked at Camilla. "Did you?" Camilla lifted her chin. "The crown is mine to wear." Anne's voice went flat. "Not to dismantle." Trump raised his hands. "This is being blown out of—" Anne snapped the case shut. "That will be impounded immediately. Custody passes to me." Trump stepped forward. "You don't have that authority." She turned to Harrington. "Secure the vehicle. Transfer the asset to Defender 1. Seal the perimeter." Harrington nodded once. Camilla's face twisted. "You're making a spectacle of nothing." Anne didn't turn. "No. You did that the moment you mistook history for wardrobe." Trump moved again. One last attempt to save face, to control the narrative, but Harrington blocked him, just with a step, just with presence. Trump stared. "You're not a knight," he muttered. "You're just a mannequin in the rain." Harrington's voice was quiet. "Maybe, but I'm the one still standing between the crown and the exit." And in that moment, there was no rebuttal, only the quiet hiss of the Defender's doors unlocking. The Defender rolled forward in silence, tires crunching wet gravel. No sirens, no guards flanking with weapons raised. Just presence, measured, heavy, controlled. Princess Anne moved with it, walking beside the vehicle like she was escorting an heir to the throne. Guards opened the rear doors. One stepped forward with gloved hands and lifted the velvet-lined case from Trump's trunk, not like it was contraband, but like it was something sacred. The moment the case left the Navigate, it was as if the entire courtyard exhaled. Camilla stepped back. Trump didn't. He raised a hand, gesturing at the scene like a courtroom. "This is a mistake, this whole thing. It's a political stunt." No one responded. Not the guards, not Charles, not even the aides who had rushed to defend him earlier. They were watching now, just watching, as the crown reclaimed what had almost slipped into shadow. Harrington stood motionless, his rifle now slung across his back. Rain dripped steadily from the brim of his ceremonial bearskin. His fingers twitched once, reflex more than emotion. The box was carried past him. He didn't follow it. He watched it go. Inside the Defender, the case was placed into a sealed crate. New lock, fresh chain of custody tag. Princess Anne signed it with a silver pen that clicked once, crisply. Then she looked to Harrington. "Chain will log you as the initiating authority." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Trump tried again, this time quieter. "That wasn't theft. It was consolidation, display. I was going to return them." Camilla's voice was tight. "It wasn't supposed to be this public." Charles turned to her. "It wasn't supposed to be at all." Trump's agent stepped forward, hands open. "With respect, this entire response violates diplomatic neutrality." Anne turned slowly. "Neutrality ends where theft begins." Trump looked to Charles, then to Harrington, like someone scanning for mercy, but all he found was the weight of people who hadn't moved. "You think the world will see this and side with a guard over a former head of state?" Trump asked. Harrington finally spoke. "They'll see what was nearly taken." Trump shook his head, backing away, his voice barely audible now. "You people don't understand power." Harrington stared forward. "We understand legacy. That's what you tried to leave with." Charles stepped in then, his voice not angry, not theatrical, just tired, but clear. The Queen wore those stones at her coronation. You were about to repurpose them for a gala. Trump raised a brow. And what do you think she'd say about all this fuss? Anne answered instead. She'd say you mistook her silence for permission. Trump's shoulders sagged. Camilla looked away. The defender doors shut. 2 soft, final clicks, and with them, the past was reclaimed. The convoy didn't race out. It moved slowly, dignified, 1 crate heavier than when it arrived, and yet everything lighter. The courtyard was quiet now. No one moved to speak. Rain fell softly on polished marble and ceremonial boots. Harrington turned. He faced Charles, waited. Charles didn't say thank you, didn't offer a handshake. He just gave a single nod, measured, deliberate, heavy with a kind of gratitude that didn't need words. Harrington returned it. And in that shared silence, something passed between monarch and guard that no diamond ever could. By the time the defender passed through the north gates, escorted by 2 unmarked escorts and a trailing Land Rover from the Royal Collection's emergency custody unit, the storm had begun to clear. Not the rain, that still lingered in fine mist, but the noise, the confrontation, the tension that had once turned marble into battleground. Now the courtyard felt like a cathedral after mass. Echoes still clung to the walls, but the judgment had already been passed. Inside the colonnade, staff returned to motion, quietly, with reverence. Someone closed the upper windows. The florist repacked his scattered petals. A royal aide made a call with a single word, confirmed. Trump remained near the vehicle, speaking in clipped tones to a younger advisor. Camilla stood slightly apart, coat soaked, hair frizzing at the edges. Whatever calculation had been running behind her eyes all evening was gone now, replaced by a distant, frozen quiet. King Charles had returned inside, without announcement, without pageantry. He had said all that needed to be said. And Princess Anne? She hadn't stayed to gloat. The moment the crate was secured and the chain of custody logged, she had disappeared back into the defender's front passenger seat, radioing Wellington Barracks with instructions. She wasn't the type to linger for applause. Neither was Harrington. He stood beside the now empty Navigator, its open trunk gaping like a secret that had been ripped out too fast. The crushed latch still hung crooked, 1 hinge bent, wires exposed like snapped ligaments. Trump stepped forward. You've made a career-ending mistake. Harrington didn't turn. Trump tried again, quieter. I know what this looks like, but you've just created an international story. You've embarrassed a guest, a partner, an ally. Harrington spoke, eyes forward. I didn't create anything. I stopped what someone else tried to erase. Trump scoffed, stepping closer. You think people will remember your name after this? You think they care who broke the story? No, they'll remember the photo, the case, as the diamonds. Harrington finally turned. And they'll remember who tried to walk off with them. Trump froze, just for a second. Harrington stepped away. He approached the nearest palisade and issued his instructions clearly, calmly. Secure the vehicle. Photograph and document internal state. Notify Wellington Barracks to dispatch secondary audit team. Flag asset entry as intercepted, prevented removal under Princess Anne's clearance. The aide nodded. No questions. This was no longer a disruption. It was procedure. Camilla moved now, stepping toward him. Not quickly, not theatrically, but with something heavier than anger. You think this makes you noble? Asked, voice low. No, ma'am, Harrington said. It makes me accountable. She narrowed her eyes. To whom? He didn't blink. To the Crown, as it was, not as it's rewritten. A pause. You think Charles will thank you? Harrington's voice was even. He already did. She didn't respond. Instead, she looked at the empty trunk, and for the first time that night, something in her face cracked. Not fury, not pride, just the dawning realization that she would never wear those diamonds now. Not as queen, not even in secret. They were gone, not lost, taken back. A single headline was already being written somewhere in the city. One aide passed Harrington a device showing the first breaking alert. Royal Guard blocks Trump convoy, recovers Queen's missing diamonds in midnight standoff. Harrington handed it back without reading the rest. He didn't need to know how the story would be told. He had already lived it. The rain had stopped by morning, not abruptly, not with drama, just faded, like a curtain falling in a theatre long after the actors had left the stage. Lancaster House stood quiet in the early light. Pale grey clouds stretched thin across the London sky. The courtyard, once alive with confrontation, was empty now, save for a few damp footprints and the scent of wet stone still lingering in the air. The Lincoln Navigator was gone. So was the Defender. But Sergeant William Harrington remained. He stood exactly where he'd been hours earlier, by the main gate in full dress, bearskin hat still worn like armour. His coat had dried in the early breeze, though the edges still showed signs of the night before, creases, watermarks, the subtle smudges of a man who'd knelt beside something priceless. His eyes didn't drift toward the cameras outside the gate, or the murmurs of press gathering beyond the outer perimeter, or the low whisper of officials meeting behind closed doors upstairs. He didn't need to watch the headlines. They were already blooming across digital screens and front pages, like the first flowers of scandal. Royal Guard forces open Trump's vehicle in palace confrontation. Missing Queen's jewels found in US convoy. Guard ignites international firestorm. Midnight rain. A royal stand. And one guard who wouldn't blink. A news drone hovered for a moment over the far end of the gate. Not obtrusive, just watching. Waiting to capture another shot of the man who, without raising his voice, without breaking formation, had brought the crown to a halt and pulled it back from the brink of disgrace. Inside the Royal Collection archives, vault doors had already been resealed. The Cullinan diamonds, newly reinventoried, now sat behind triple layers of glass and stone. They would never leave unguarded again. And yet, for all their sparkle, they were no longer the most watched thing in the kingdom. That title belonged, if only for a day, to a single still figure. A soldier. A man. A line in the rain. William Harrington didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't move. Because now, more than ever, he understood. Some things don't need to shout to be remembered. They just have to remain. Should a royal guard have the right to forcibly stop a foreign convoy, especially one linked to a former head of state? Was Sergeant Harrington's decision bold patriotism or reckless defiance? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on so you never miss what really happens behind the Crown's most guarded walls. And if you know someone who still remembers the late Queen's legacy, share this video with them. We upload every single day, so tap the next story on your screen and we'll see you tomorrow.